can relate to Hillsborough because they lost their superintendent over this. They laid off 25 teachers. So the resolution states that Hillsborough Board of Education, now, your state, you only can ask each year in property taxes, the law is a 2% increase in your property levy tax. So we get about $80 million, so we can go 1.6 million, so 2% of 80. So school boards are stuck where you can't go over 2%. And so they're proposing in this that they want policy language allowing districts to exceed their 2% cap when it's necessary for them to meet their local share requirements. In other words, there's going to be a big discussion by many districts across the state to lobby the state legislature. What happens now is you have to go to referendum. And it's a big state issue. You hear it all the time. You don't want your property taxes to go up. So the New Jersey school boards, what they have to vote on, and this is why I'm putting it to you, because I represent you at this delegate assembly, whether I vote yes or no. The proposal, which I helped write for New Jersey school boards, is to put in language into the New Jersey school board's policy manual that the New Jersey school board's belief is that in instances where districts cannot meet their local fair share per the state funding formula, those districts may be allowed to exceed statutory levy caps to meet their local share. In other words, they can, without having to write a referendum question, go to 2.5%, 3%. So they don't find themselves in a position where they have to make these very hard decisions about their school district. And at the same time, that committee will be recommending taking it to the school finance committee. I have another year as a board member, so I can chair that committee one more year. And I have delved into the formula mathematically, and there are a lot of factors in there that we don't know where they come from. There's county weighting averages. There's a lot in there that makes it not such a good state funding formula. And we started last year. I had Union County School Boards Association president, Essex County School Boards president, going out to their school districts and gathering what the business administrator gets, because he's the only one who gets to see these particular Excel spreadsheets, and then we can start to make some sort of recommendations. And I'll leave it at this, but I've already found one area that New Jersey School Boards agrees with that will make a difference in how much school districts get that is not fair in this formula, and that is in special education. The state decided to take a state average of the full-time enrollment of your district as only having 15% special education students. There are districts around the state that could have 50% special education students, some that could have 5%. So what I'm telling you is that I'm just asking for the board for your agreement that when I go on this Saturday representing the Piscataway Township Board of Education, that we agree that with this policy language where we would ask the New Jersey school boards to speak on behalf of us to the language that I just said. Bill?
Just so I'm clear, so if I understand the intent of the resolution, it is to provide for when there's a situation where your year-over-year increase in local fair share exceeds that which you could raise via a 2% levy increase in that given year, it would allow you to go over the 2%?
Yes, because in their particular case, they had a sudden spike in ratables which obscured the calculation of their local share.
That makes a great deal of sense, because that sudden spike of ratables can come about in a wide variety of ways. You could have the most ironic being you could have a very large new housing development come online, which will actually send more students to the schools, and that housing development will cause a spike in your ratables at the same time. And if you're not allowed to raise, the levy beyond that 2% that year, you could very quickly run into trouble. So that sounds like a sensible addition to the law.
Any other questions?
So, in other words, what you're saying is that it would allow our taxes to be raised without what? Without,
Because right now by statute,
mhm,
we can only go up 2% on the property levy tax.
mhm,
So if we go out to collect $80 million for a $100 million budget,
mhm,
we only can collect another $1.6 million. If Hillsborough find themselves in, if you use the same math, they found themselves in a position where they didn't get the 80 million. That new calculation said you get 75 million, and they were shorted. And so you've got to somehow make up for that, and you make up for it by going above your 2% cap. And you can do a calculation where it may end up being 2.9%, 3%. But that's not allowed by law right now. But it was a topic of discussion. Jeff Detang, remember when we were down at the New Jersey School Boards, every year they have senators and assemblymen, and they have a panel. And we were asking these types of questions to them so that they are aware that the legislation that they pass has impact on the school district, and we are proposing ways in which to help them, help the school districts. But again, it's difficult because, do you want your taxes to go up a little bit more? And a lot of times the answer is no. So if this were to happen at Piscataway, we'd have to have a special referendum question. And Hillsborough has done this 3 years in a row, and it has failed 3 years in a row. So as a result of it failing, their school district is really, it's not well. It's not well financially. And I can't underemphasize, because I get excited about this as much as I do about the sign. I sat down today with the math, and David Olivero, and I'll call him out, Bill Irwin, and when you were doing it, other people on the board, we critically look, and we're financially stable, and there's no rhyme or reason because we pay attention. And the thing is that you have to, and David does a fantastic job telling us what's going on, and then we can respond to it, and we stay ahead of the curve. Anyway.
Just a quick clarification, because it's an important nuance to the law, because it's easily misunderstood. The 2% year-over-year increase refers to the total amount of the local tax levy, the total revenue collected from the local tax levy that can be increased year-over-year. That may or may not result in a 2% increase to the taxpayer. It depends upon the ratables in the town that year. In other words, to try and make the math simple, let's say you had ratables such that they were generating $100 million in property taxes. That was the school district's portion. And then a whole new set of ratables came online that year, if they were just taxed at the normal rate, would send another $5 million, to the school board without, all other things being equal, without anyone else's taxes going up at all. The school board would not be allowed in that situation to say, okay, we'll take that entire $5 million increase. They're limited to the 2% of the $100 million total levy that was of the previous year. So in the, again, in the worst case scenario, or a very large housing development comes online, that development is paying taxes in, starting that year. And normally you would be able to say, okay, well, they're just paying their normal fair share of taxes. Another $5 million is coming into the school board budget, which allows us to educate those students. But the law says, no, you can't raise it more than $2 million this year. So you're not getting that extra 3 basically ever.
Right.
So in that particular year, the total levy would go up 2%. The net effect to existing taxpayers in dollar terms would actually be 0, because the entire $2 million would be coming from the new levy. from the new construction.
Yeah.
But you would be missing out on the additional 3. So sometimes
It's
there's
a
confusion between
nuance,
the
but-
taxpayer,
but
what the
what-
taxpayer pays and what the actual
What-
levy
what
is. I
this-
just wanted
what
to
this
draw
is
that
about-
distinction.
It's actually a protection of the school district that gives them an out, that does not put them in a position, because those people on fiscal, like Mr. Patel and so on, we get a calendar for the year to put together the budget. We get to a particular point now where we are estimating what it's going to take to educate all the children. And David puts that together, eventually Frank will present it to us. But imagine you put that together, and then you're relying on $20 million from the state to do that. And because in your particular town, something happened that was out of your control, this spike in ratables or something like that, the calculation changes. Nobody understands the math kind of thing. All they understand is that you're not getting $1 million from the state. That affects the running and the operation, the revenue stream of the district. And then there's a fallout. The fallout is, what does the school board do about it? And the school board has to make some cuts. And so that's not a popular thing to do. This, to me, is a preventive measure, even though it goes against the statute, that gives a school board an out to not be in that situation. So I'm saying a lot, there's a lot there. It is a very complicated issue. People have been working on this for years, obviously. We do not have a viable state funding, public education funding formula in the state, but I'm saying that every now and then something happens, a district is affected, that district usually is the one that writes the resolution, and they're the ones that are screaming the loudest. We haven't had to scream for a while.
Perhaps you could forward the resolution language to all of the board members, just to
Okay.
we can
Yeah, 'cause I have not-
review it and give you any
I have
feedback
not
if we
received
have
it
it.
myself from the New Jersey
Okay,
school
so as
boards.
soon as-
They usually get a formal
full
booklet and things like that, as you know. Since I helped write the resolution, I had it in front of me, but, yes.
Just
One.
quick, thank you.
Go ahead.
Just quick, is it completely removing the cap or increasing it?
It's not removing the cap, it's just allowing you to go above the cap.
Oh, okay.
But it's allowing you to go to above the cap, that you can do the math, that you know that you have to go to 2.5%, you know you have to go to 3%. You'll know what you have to go to,
Right,
but because of what happened in the local share.
right.
That's
And
what it's about.
It's not giving districts, leverage to say, oh, I can just ask for more money and not have to. It's because of the calculation you made at the beginning of when you were setting up your
Yes.
budget versus what you actually get.
Yes.
Okay, to
And,
make up.
and remember, this is a belief. This is nowhere near, and this is what makes it difficult for people to understand. When you get to the delegate assembly, and you get so many people coming to the microphone, this is not something that's going to become law or just get acted on. It's only a belief of all the school districts, and once the New Jersey School Board has that permission, they go pounding on the doors of the legislatures to try and make it happen. It's the only way to change this statute. And so that's what this is about.
I said, it's just the outcome of an understanding that the Fair School Forming Funding Act does not fairly fund us. If we were pushing that between municipalities, the township, the school boards, to get our equal share, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because those dollars would come to us, especially since they're talking about limiting adjustment aid and things of that nature. So I think that's where we really need to be pushing in terms of that too, is getting people understanding that we need from people in Trenton to give us our fair share in our dollars, because we're underfunded of what.
Well, actually, Ralph, it's actually, that's a good comment, but it's not quite what is happening, because there is what's known as S2 that happened. And what they're doing is that they have added legislation onto the School Funding Reform Act, where now we are actually getting more money. So they have corrected the issue of fair funding amongst districts. This is a one-off based on a municipality growing like Hillsborough, where people have moved in and the housing and the property values. It's a little bit different situation than what we were in. It's a one-off. This has to do with the municipality and the tax rates and all that other stuff. but I hear you, because we were actually the beneficiary of what you said. If you look at Piscataway and the funding that we have received over the last several years, our screening and everything else, we have actually been getting increases. So we're doing okay. So I don't want to say any more complicated, but good comment. I mean, so do I have everybody's permission to say yes on this resolution?
You have mine, but I'd still like to see.
We still wanna see
I
it.
still want to see the.
Yeah,
All right,
I'm
well,
here to see it.
Yeah, well, okay.
Well, I say yes,
I'll mail it out to you.
because obviously this girl didn't do the
Um,
diligence.
The other item, moving on, is there any other new business, any of the board? Be it resolved that we have to do this, that the board adjourn to executive session for the purpose of the discussion of a student matter pursuant to law NJSA 10-4-4-12B. At the conclusion of the executive session, the board will reconvene in public session. Action will not be taken.
Frank, take a light up there.
Yeah, you want to do that now?
Mr. President, during a break, I had indicated to the superintendent that the matter that I think you anticipated us going back to discuss, my recommendation was that we defer the continuation of that discussion to our next meeting, because based on what was presented in our earlier session, there's some information I'd like to get from our special education department that will help inform our discussion when we meet again. So I'd like to do that if you don't mind.
Okay. And then my last item, I would say, is that I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And I came across a saying that hit home with me, and I have it in front of me. And I want to say that what I'm grateful for is I want to be thankful for my difficult times. During those times, I think that I've grown. Be thankful for my limitations, because they give me the opportunity for improvement. And be thankful for each new challenge, because it will build my strength and my character.
How nice.
Mr. President,
It's in my
just
head.
had a question, Mr. President. I see some newly elected candidates. Will they be informed of the process moving forward? Okay, just wanted to make sure they were in attendance.
Right, the January meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be a process of orientation before then as well. The superintendent will be getting a hold of you. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion.
In favor?